Speaker is Maya Subrahmanian. She's an associate professor at Northeastern Hill University in Meghalaya, India. And her talk title is Making the History of Philosophy, a Feminist Critical Analysis.
Thank you. That's good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here to present something specifically with critical on philosophy and history of philosophy. I'm going to, from the title itself, it's clear. It's a critical look at the history of philosophy that I would want to do. So my problem is that there are no women in the history of philosophy. So I'll try to make, in this paper, I'm actually trying to make a historical analysis, critical analysis from feminist perspective to discuss the exclusion of women from the history of philosophy, making us really think whether women existed or not earlier. I mean, all time, even just recently only we see some names included into our curriculum. In the West it is better, it has changed a bit, but in other parts of the world, in India also, we don't have much familiarity with women thinkers. So I'm trying to just there are some such steps being taken by women thinkers who are at the departments. So my problem in this paper would be that all prominent compilations on the history of philosophy, we all know from people from philosophy, would show that philosophy has been always very, very patriarchal in its contents and methods. There were enormously efficient intellectuals in antiquity and later periods, but they were not heard much and they were never included in the books of history of philosophy, books on history. Recently there has been an attempt, last couple of decades, maybe 2-3 decades in between, we can see very vigilant attempts by the feminist philosophers. So some of the main book we can see an attempt by Mary Ellen Waite in 1987. It's published as a history of women philosophers. That book has documented in 4 volumes many women thinkers which were not there so earlier in any other compilations. So I'm just introductory thing, but before that introductory thing I would like to put forward these references, these particular books. And we can also see even earlier we find in 1690, 17th century also there was an attempt by Manet written this Historia Militarum Philosopharum, but it was not initially published into English, so we didn't know that also until 20th century, to say so. Maybe when people from the United States tried to do these specifically women thinkers. Okay, so there was also in that book also many women names were recorded. So what happened to these female philosophers? Whether women thought, whether women philosophized, or whether they existed also, whether they were existing out there as human beings, or what happened to these women? Of course, we can see the answer for me. I would explain in that article a little more also about this power dynamism in the field of making knowledge. So this epistemological enterprise, we always had been thinking that it's all for men. Women are something like a body, not thinking, or things like that. So this was very, very prevalent all over the world. And initially, we in India, we had a thought that, okay, maybe in the Western countries it's different. But if you study the history of thought systems, we can see that it was very much patriarchal. The misogyny in this enterprise of making knowledge that we could really trace. We have heard, for me, actually, as a feminist philosopher, to say so, me and my friends, we had this discussion, then we have only heard Hypatia, how do you pronounce it in here? Exactly, we still don't know. We have also known this, there is a journal called Hypatia, Women's Studies Journal. From the United States, it is actually not from Greece or Europe. This Hypatia is actually a Neoplatonist philosopher and mathematician, so on and so forth, intellectual during that 3rd, 4th century Christ era. But her story, of course, everybody can Google if interested. Pathetic story, life story. She had been very independent individual, intellectual activities. She had been having those days. So, of course, in the beginning centuries of Christ era, so what is the situation that we all know? The religious authorities assassinated her, to say so. She was publicly dragged, beaten to death. So she, in my opinion, she didn't even get a decent punishment, decent punishment like what Socrates was getting, to consume poison on his own. But she was killed, literally, in a very bad manner, in a very horrible way, I would say. So the dynamics of various institutional power and gender, related to gender, is very, very obvious from Hypatia's murder. Still, people knew that, and still no later philosophers attempted to get her listed into the history of philosophy. As a thinker, she never existed among philosophers, who were all men in a way. So, but if we look at the history, we could see even before her many names recorded nowadays, recently in the compilations by women. In 5th century before Christ, from pre-Socratic period, we can see during Pythagorean era, we see some names: Theano, Themistoclea. Themistoclea was supposed to be the teacher of Pythagoras, or we do not know exactly. People are saying that she was a teacher, mother, wife, lover, something. It's always connected to a man. That's another analysis, a critical analysis that I would make in it. That means Pythagoras was the protagonist, hero, and then main intellectual, then whoever follow him. In that way only it was presented, but at least there were women. There are evidences that there were women. And in even there are, I saw some references also that Theano, a name similar to Thales, maybe the first philosopher, not Thales, Theano, a woman, was the first philosopher. Like that also some writings people have done here, and there are comments also like that. So later in Socratic period, of course, since Plato was the person who was writing about it all, we could find many names of women which we never knew earlier. So even nowadays, people don't know. Only if the feminist philosophers are screaming, then only speaking it out and talking about it, writing about it. So my paper is also part of that attempt, actually. So many names: Aspasia, Diotima, Hypatia, Arete, etc., from Greece. So they all appear in Plato's dialogues. But no later studies on Plato or Plato's dialogues never discussed about these women and these women's contributions in this so-called dialectics. So I'm concentrating upon that development of this dialectical method, so-called, in philosophy, in which women participated very, very lively. And even they were somewhat instructing people like Socrates. And Socrates himself is talking about this particular, especially particular names. So we can see Diotima, Aspasia. Socrates has talked about Aspasia as his teacher again. Diotima also is having a very main important role in among the interlocutors who were taking part in the symposium, especially Diotima in symposium, Plato's symposium. We see this character there. so that since people don't discuss it about these characters, we have a lot of studies about other male protagonists, some other interlocutors, some taking up some themes but not women. So this is also a power dynamism we could really trace in the making, production and reproduction, rewriting of the material that we have already there to discuss about any topics that we develop in later period. So Aspasia, in this paper, for example, I am taking Aspasia and Diotima mainly to discuss what kind of contribution they were trying to make. Of course, I may not get time to go in detail to that all things, but just mentioning. A woman named Diotima, who appears in Plato's book Symposium, is understood as Socrates' teacher or mother by some rereadings on it. And another woman, Aspasia, is a name mentioned by Plato in Menexenus, Diotima in Symposium, in which Socrates says Aspasia taught him. Literally, he is talking like that in between the dialogues. Though the topic in dialogue is given as funeral oration in Greece during that time, and rhetoric, gender issues also being discussed in that dialogues, in between the dialogues. So we can see they have taken part very seriously in the development of dialectics as live interlocutors. And also they have taken part in developing concepts around rhetoric and virtue, of course, various other topics that they were dealing with in the dialogues. Of course, during that time, virtue ethics, etc., ethical aspects. So I will come into that in this paper again to discuss how women were very much. Also, this is a discussion from feminist perspective, that how women were physically presented to discuss ethics, moral philosophy, etc., virtue, etc. So this is also another issue, but at least we could see some women there for that purpose. For example, in Symposium, this is the main discussion about this development of Platonic love, to say so. So this Eros, that discussion is through Diotima. So she is trying to, I'm for interesting pictures, this kind of representation in art, we can really see that women were really in conversation with male protagonists. And then they were making knowledge themselves, or they were imparting knowledge, or maybe to discussion. And then that time the main method was, of course, dialogue, discussion, dialectics, the so-called maybe, let's say, this back and forth questioning, or maybe whatever we define, Vilankas, meutic, and exercise, that kinds of exercise, really. And also, very interestingly enough, in Symposium, Diotima is the person actually who develops this meutic aspect. Actually, as a feminist critique, I was initially thinking in my classes, I have sometimes, I don't like this term, meutic, why should they use that for discussing this dialectical method? But it is brought out in a very interesting way in that dialogues in Symposium by this character Diotima, by saying that it's actually, you may say a woman is pregnant. Then what do you mean by that? You mean somebody, when by pregnancy, pregnant by body or mind? One can be pregnant by mind, soul, or that kind of terms they are using. The pregnancy is not just, and also it goes on and on into the discussion, very interestingly enough, into the discussion of eudaimonia. How do people get into this state? Socrates is himself talking about it, interestingly enough. People think that they make offsprings, and then that gives them eudaimonia. So you make, you produce something of virtue or wisdom. You also get eudaimonia. So this is so in that sense, what's the difference between these? So that kind of discussion goes on and on, interestingly, to say that there is no such gender differences in which making eudaimonia, or in which we could say maybe in the making of ethics, ethical aspects or what. So in that sense, Deitima took part specifically in this development of ethical, moral conceptions during that time, and also about this body-mind problem, which we see much later in the modern period, that is taken by Descartes that time, and then also about gender itself, the conceptions which were not discussed in a sense with using that kind of term gender or anything, but still the gender issues were addressed by these discussions. So just for making a historical analysis, I'm trying to then take some thinkers from modern thought as well, and from India also as a part of Eastern as a part of analyzing some Eastern aspects. So I'm not explaining more. Oh, only 3 minutes. Oh, okay. So I will go to Indian part now. So in modern feminists, we are now familiar. Simone de Beauvoir, Mary Wollstonecraft, then Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote Ethics of Ambiguity. So my point there is only connected to the last paper also, this issue of rationality in the modern time, the prominence of rationality which defined the ethics, kind of Kantian deontology and all that things were very well criticized by feminist philosophers like Simone de Beauvoir, Mary Wollstonecraft, a contemporary to Kant, and Beauvoir, contemporary to our existentialist philosophers, and so critic on Hegel and all. So they were also trying, then we cannot make that kind of teleology or ontological, deontological, categorical imperative in terms of defining ethics. So that is there. So I'm not going to explain that here. I will go to again the ancient time in India. So in ancient time in India, we also see characters like this, but even before the 600 BC time that we discuss in Greek, in India, the scriptures are actually claiming that this Vedic period, Buddhist period and all, it's 800,000 BC, like that we are trying, people are saying. Various problem with chronology, various problems with the myth and reality, because these all are coming like characters. These all are coming like epics, and Upanishad scriptures are all like verses in which characters are coming up with all these ideas, discussing these ideas and or developing these ideas. So here, and especially in ancient Greek philosophy also we see that whether these people existed or not, especially when we are talking about women, they will come with that question, but it's applicable to every man also, whether they existed or not. So this issue with myth and reality is quite little bit more complex in Indian scenario, because it's very much intertwined with religious scriptures and folkloristic mythical stories everywhere. It's all over, worldwide. So this myth and reality is one point that we have to also discuss. So in Buddhist era, we see many women who wrote a book called Teri Gatha, which means they are writing their transition from householder to the monastery, to spiritual to say so. They just took it as like a freedom in that way. And in Indian context, we see, just like what we discussed about Hypatia and Daitima, we see Sulabha, a woman, another woman, and in Hindu scriptures, and Sulabha and Gargi, who are engaging with their male protagonists, the sage and seers. But for example, also with kings, Sulabha is discussing various matters as the topics as virtue, gender, rhetoric, how to engage in conversation, how to make the dialogue, etc. These kinds of aspects, and then winning over this King Janaka, Sulabha. And then Gargi with the Yajnavalkya Asir. There is this practice that existed earlier, like that we can read in these books, that a stage for this all. I can give you a picture also about this Gargi and Sulabha, how they were these kind of stages that to make discussions with intellectuals, I mean, the sages and seers. So one woman wanderer, a wanderer woman like that. My point is that there are many women characters in epics, but they all appear like that, wife or husband, I mean wife or daughter or lover or of some kings or sages. But Sulabha and Gargi were not coming up like that. They were very independent, wandering, knowledge making, so dedicated to making knowledge and just that. So that way they are coming up to this dialogue, stage of dialogue, and then they are making these kinds of discussions. So Sulabha took part in this development of dialectics, rhetoric, gender, and all that in the Indian context very much, which were never in any study on Mahabharata or Rigveda. It is there, even from the Rigveda, it is there, but it's all lost as well. So this power dynamics, which also would work for just to spoil, causing the disappearance or of these kinds of references and causing the exclusion of women from the history of thought. So that is very, very clear. And in the Indian context, it is still more complicated because various intersectional elements in feminist discussion, we would say, various elements as religion, caste, class, ethnicity, regionality, all that kinds of things will intersect in the discussion of gender discrimination. Like in any other fields, how power plays, like in the field of making knowledge as well. So there are some Buddhist nuns that I am giving in the picture. So in this article, I would discuss how in modern time, Tarabai, Ramabai, in modern time we can also see women who engage very much. Nowadays there are some discussions and writings very much coming on this modern time, thinkers from India. So we have actually Pandita Ramabai. Pandita means scholar. She got this label finally, to say so, from Kolkata University, that Pandita. She had been such a scholar in Sanskrit and to criticize scriptures, which was making women subordinate when subjugating to, or just a household, a domestic animal or something like that. No social life is so they were social activists, Ramabai and Tarabai, who wrote Sri Purushatolana, man-woman, for man-woman equality. She was writing a comparison between, and Ramabai was writing about the scriptures, specifically making a critique. And so this is actually Pandita Ramabai finally anyhow got some recognition, a stamp in her name, in her picture. That is also wonderful. So thank you very much. My point is that finally also that how these power dynamics are at play while in the enterprise of making knowledge as well, and especially philosophers being mainly thinkers how come they are excluded women like this way and never ever thought about that issue. And in history we can see women historians, in literature we can see women writers. This all changed, and even from earlier historical periods we see, but in philosophy not at all. So this kind of an attempt will address that issue also, as well as put forward the works in the thought systems in various historical periods done by women thinkers. Thank you.
Speaker is Maya Subrahmanian. She's an associate professor at Northeastern Hill University in Meghalaya, India. And her talk title is Making the History of Philosophy a Feminist Critical Analysis.